Thank you, everyone. Thank you, musicians. Thank you, sound Craig back there. Thank you so much. I'm going to start with a poem, and I'm going to finish with a poem. This is, I think I found this last week at here. I Heard God Laughing, renderings of Hafiz, who was born in 1320 in Persia. Someone should start laughing. I have 1,000 brilliant lies for the question, how are you? I have 1,000 brilliant lies for the question, what is God? If you think that the truth can be known from words, if you think that the sun and the ocean can pass through that tiny opening called the mouth, oh, someone should start laughing. Someone should start wildly laughing now. I love that because I think a sense of humor is probably the most important quality of our lives, or one of the most important, because love comes through a sense of humor. Our stories, not ourselves. Stories have been part of our history for thousands of years. And maybe even before we began to speak languages, stories were, we used our bodies, we used dance, we used symbols to impart, to communicate with each other. Stories are our emotional expressions, our cognitive growth, and our language skills from the time we were pretty young depend on the stories we hear, read, and tell all of our lives. When I think of my life, I think, what's my story? And I hope it's a funny story, and I hope it's a happy story, and I hope it's a sad story, because we all have sad stories as well as happy stories. We all have all kinds of stories. So what are stories good for? They connect us. They're far more than entertainment. Stories connect us. We discover that we are not alone. The stories we listen to bring our common humanity to every person on the planet. They express the emotional connection that we have with each other. They express ideas. We learn to expand and take on other ideas that open our consciousness and open our minds and open our hearts to things that we may not have been open to before. And that's really important to me, that we are forever expanding. We are expanding. We are opening our consciousness, and we are opening our hearts to things that we may have rejected before, and people we may have rejected before. We have the opportunity, but it's often through knowing their story that is the important way that we're connecting and discovering that we actually can take on more than we thought. Our vast cultural information is held and transmuted through our stories. When we're young, we learn almost everything through stories, and we learn to make sense of the world around us. And if, when we're young, we're missing part of those stories, we can miss out on part of this wholeness that we accomplish through exchange with other people and with their stories. We can miss out on something. However, we are much more than our stories. We need our stories. We use our stories. Our stories become everything to us, but we are not our stories. We are much more than our stories. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. But our stories support us in this human experience that we have with each other. So I have a few questions for you. And I'm going to answer a few. I'm going to pretend to answer a few questions, but there are always lots of questions. How do we have our stories without becoming identified with them? How do we tell and share our stories without becoming identified with them? And if we're not identifying with our story, what are we identifying with? So I didn't write that down. So we have to identify with that spiritual self, with that spiritual almost, well, it comes first, it came to me first as just emptiness. It's like, if I'm not who I think I am, then who am I? I am this spiritual being that has no boundaries and has no stories and has no way of being, has no way of, I can't even express it because it's unexpressible. The Spirit has only us as a way of expressing in the world. So we can understand that what we express is our spirituality. And as far as we can go in understanding and speaking of spirituality, which is almost impossible, is only as far as we can be spiritual in the world and relate on a spiritual level with each other, which is truly a challenge if we have a hard time finding the words. And yes, it's because any word, and I think this came through this poem, I heard God laughing. It's hard to find the words to express the truth of who we actually are. So to go back to my words, to go back to my writing, what is the story that you are telling other people? What do we do when we're feeling out of balance and we're about to tell a negative story? We're about to complain or we're about to criticize? I suggest we don't hesitate to tell the story. And do not hesitate to vent, because we have to vent. We have to do that. But we must find the right person at the right time. It's very rude to just go out there and vent. And I'm sure we all have done it, and I'm sure we all forgive ourselves as others have forgiven us. And we have a negative story, and we don't have to stay in that negative story. We open ourselves to a bigger picture and know that there are things we do not know about other people and why they do the things that they do. We truly do not know. And it's very important to understand. I think it's very important to understand that. It makes life a little more peaceful for us if we recognize that we really don't understand, much of which we tend to criticize and have difficulty with. It's important to remember we are all doing our best. We are all. My mother did her best. Your mother did her best. But sooner or later, we find ourselves listening to a negative story that we don't like listening to. We can politely leave, or we can continue listening. And as we listen, it's important to remember that that other person is not their story. They're not their story. They are a spiritual being just as you are. They are special. You are special. we're all spiritual beings, and we're all just doing our best. As we're telling, you will notice that as you're telling a negative story, as you're trying to communicate something that's really difficult, we have the opportunity, we have a choice. There is an instant where we can or not choose to make a choice to speak the better part of what's going on. There are always positive aspects of negative situations, and even many negative situations humor can be a way out. That's what we do when we feel pinched in. We try to find humor, and many of us, most of us do, I'm sure we do. Another question. That's about the stories that we're telling other people. And so what is the story we are telling ourselves? So as much as possible, it's helpful to be aware of how we're feeling at any given moment. Are we able to catch ourselves doing a negative story, telling a negative story, and change the story? We often see ourselves as victims of other people, victims of circumstance, just victims, and that's a choice. That's a choice to see that. So Randall's been helping me. Randall's been doing the work. Do repairs, Randall Bruce. No, not Randall, counts. Randy. So I go out there and watch these guys doing, and I'm making jokes. I find myself, if I wasn't making jokes, I would be very concerned about what's going on. So they're washing off the roof, and it looks great what they're doing. But I have, at the end of, it's a nice slanted roof like this, and down at the bottom I have all these plants in pots. They are filthy. Those plants, those poor things, I cleaned them off last night or the other day, and I have to clean them off again. But the roof is coated with this nice plastic stuff, and the roof will not be leaking next winter. Thank you to Randy. So you have a choice to seek a higher place as part of the story. So ultimately, I believe that we do make choices, and the stories we tell are not just the experiences that we experience before we're telling this story. We have, in some way, I don't know exactly how, we're responsible for those stories. We're responsible for attracting. I'm responsible for attracting the experience of cancer in my body, in my life. So it was kind of interesting looking at the faces of the doctors when they told me that I had cancer, because I knew before I sat down with them that their faces told me so much before their words told me anything. And so I felt this, I was prepared for any kind of thing that they might say to me. And when they said that I had cancer, I thought, I'm gonna be okay. In fact, I'm going to use this. And that was my thought, because for years I've been giving talks and writing, and I'm going to use this experience. And I have used the experience. But here are some more thoughts about our stories. So, I wanted to say this. When I'm going to the doctor and I don't know what's going to happen, and this is true for many of us, we have a choice right there. And so as I experience this kind of dread and fear, I tell myself all is well. I have these affirmations that I use, and I think it's very important for us at that moment to take responsibility for whatever we're feeling. And sometimes we just can't say, "Get me out of this." The way out of something happens to be through it. And to use it and to find a way to work with what's going on, just working with what's going on. So here's some other ideas about our stories. Lies. They are part of our reality. And lately we've heard a lot more than usual. But we all have told lies. We all have told lies. Or maybe not the complete truth, or maybe just because we're hoping for something else we're not experiencing, or we're not in knowledge about right then. Once again, we just don't know another person's motivation for lying. We just don't know. And even more so than lying, it's more like half-truths. And I totally guilty of half-truths, you know? And it would probably be a good idea to just learn more about that. It's interesting. So here are some more ideas. We're leaving lies behind us for a while. We can continue learning how to deepen our listening skills. Our greatest, I believe this is my sense, that our greatest gift to another person is to be a good listener, to be a compassionate listener, because you will learn more and more compassion as you listen, as you understand that everyone has a story, and it may not be something that you like, but there's always a reason why you're listening. There's always a reason why you're part of it. And so it's important to look at the big picture. And one way to do that is to deepen our listening skills, and it's really important. Using our stories to inspire and lift others. All of us, every single one of us, have had terrible things happen to us. And so let's continue to look at the ways we're moving forward from that experience. And we're dragging our stories with us, no question about that. So the other thing we can do is find the stories that are in music and in writing poetry and in in art, because there are extraordinary stories in art and music, and that's how many of us tell our stories in music and art, and in our writing that nobody reads but us. This is kind of fun, putting my hand all the way out here. I like that. It makes me bigger, right? It makes me taller. So it's best if we're to stick to our own stories. Although we often tell other people's stories, it's best to stick to our own stories, because that's the way another person will connect with you over your story, not the story of your neighbor or the story, which we don't know. We don't know the stories of our neighbors. There's so much we just don't know. And we assume a great deal. Often we assume a great deal. So use your stories to laugh at yourself. I was in Toastmasters in the early 90s. Oh my goodness. And this woman came to me and said, "Oh, I see that you laugh at yourself. That's very important." And I didn't even realize it. But at some point, I did learn to laugh at myself, and I thought, wow, what a nice thing for her to say to me, because it helped me, it just helped me know that although I felt vulnerable, although I felt ridiculous, although I felt embarrassed, that those kinds of stories are what connect us to each other. That's the kind of story that will help another person just, oh, that's who you are. That's who you are. That's who I am. And I'm responsible for that, for creating that. Not just the story, but the situation that led to the story. We love our stories. And we love each other. And we are not our stories. It is, it's really spiritual practice to write our stories, to sing our stories, to turn our stories into poetry, to turn our stories into art. That is all spiritual practice. Telling a story is spiritual practice. So there's a quote from Jennifer McMahon. Storytelling is not about making things up. It's more like inviting the stories to come through, letting themselves be told. And that's the spiritual awakening that happens through telling stories. So as I was beginning to do this writing, I wrote a poem. I read a story and then I wrote a poem, and I'll finish with this because I'm way long. And the book I read was, Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. So these 14 lines are along the rhythm of Dr. Seuss. Oh, the places you'll go and the things that you'll do, the love that you carry will change me and you. The love that you share is the love that you are, and the whole world wants it. So take it real far. Take love to the ends of the world and beyond, then return with it all and open your mind. For we need love so much, both body and soul. We can all be healed if we make it so. We may want to let go of all of our fears to find our real freedom and share with our peers. We can let go of our anger, let go of our greed. We can give much to others. We have all we need. This can be easy. We allow self to trust. No matter what happens, we all shall be blessed.